The morning sun barely touched the horizon when Sarah Chen arrived at the military training compound. Her boots were still stiff, her uniform crisp with newness, and her hands trembled slightly as she carried her equipment bag toward the communications building. 22 years old, fresh out of technical school, she had been assigned to the combat controller team as their radio technician just 3 weeks ago. The older soldiers called her the kid behind her back, and she knew it. Inside the operations room, the team was already gathered around a large tactical map spread across a metal table. Captain Marcus Rivera, the team leader, was pointing at various positions while his men nodded and took notes. Sarah slipped in quietly, trying to make herself invisible in the corner where the radio equipment was stationed. She began her routine checks, testing frequencies and ensuring all communication channels were clear and functional. "Chen, you're with us today," Captain Rivera announced suddenly, his voice cutting through the room's chatter. Sarah looked up, surprised. Field exercises were usually handled by the senior communications specialist, a gruff sergeant named Holland, who had 15 years of experience. But Holland was on medical leave after twisting his ankle during the previous week's training. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt inside. The other team members glanced at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. She was unproven, untested in real field conditions. Radio work in a classroom was vastly different from maintaining communications during live tactical operations. The team loaded into 3 vehicles and headed toward the remote training range, a vast expanse of desert terrain that stretched for miles. Sarah sat in the back of the second truck, surrounded by seasoned operators who traded jokes and stories with the ease of long familiarity. She checked her radio equipment repeatedly, making sure every connection was secure, every battery fully charged. The weight of responsibility pressed on her shoulders like a physical force. When they arrived at the staging area, Captain Rivera briefed the team on the day's exercise. They would be conducting a simulated rescue operation with live fire exercises at various distances. Multiple teams would be positioned across the terrain, and maintaining clear communications would be critical for coordination and safety. Sarah's job was to establish and maintain radio contact between all units, relay coordinates, and ensure that no transmission was missed or garbled. The team moved out across the rough terrain, and Sarah struggled to keep pace while managing her equipment. The radio pack seemed to grow heavier with each step, and the desert sun beat down mercilessly. But she refused to ask for help or show any sign of weakness. She had fought too hard to earn this position to let physical discomfort defeat her. By midday, they had established their forward operating position on a ridge overlooking a wide valley. Sarah set up the communication station with practiced efficiency, extending the antenna and testing each channel. The radio crackled to life, and she began coordinating with the other teams scattered across the landscape. Her voice remained calm and professional as she relayed messages, confirmed positions, and maintained the communication net that held the entire operation together. "All stations, this is base, confirm your positions," she transmitted, listening carefully as each team reported in. The exercise was proceeding smoothly, each phase transitioning seamlessly into the next. Sarah allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Maybe she could do this after all. Then everything changed. One of the forward teams reported contact with the simulated enemy force. The radio traffic increased dramatically, with multiple voices requesting support, calling for coordinates and reporting tactical movements. Sarah's fingers flew across the radio controls, switching frequencies, relaying messages, and ensuring that critical information reached the right people at the right time. In the chaos of simulated combat, Captain Rivera suddenly appeared beside her position. He was observing something through his binoculars, his expression focused and intense. "Chen, I need you to relay coordinates to the sniper team. Target at bearing 270, range approximately 3,000 meters. Sarah's heart skipped. 3,000 meters was an extreme distance well beyond typical engagement ranges. She relayed the information precisely, her voice cutting through the radio chatter with clear authority. The sniper team acknowledged, and she could hear them making calculations, adjusting for wind, elevation, and the curvature of the earth itself at such distances. What Sarah didn't know was that this wasn't part of the planned exercise. Captain Rivera had spotted an unauthorized drone flying over the restricted training area, a serious security breach. The target was real, and the shot would require extraordinary skill. The sniper team was setting up for an actual intercept, not a training scenario. The minutes stretched like hours as Sarah maintained communications, coordinating between the sniper team and command. She heard the technical discussion between the shooters, their calm professional voices discussing minute adjustments in angle and elevation. The wind had picked up, adding another layer of complexity to an already nearly impossible shot. Through her headset, she heard the lead sniper counting down. On target. Windhold calculated. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The sharp crack of the rifle shot echoed across the valley, followed by several seconds of tense silence. Sarah held her breath, waiting. Target eliminated, came the confirmation. Drone is down. That's a confirmed hit at 3,300 meters. The radio net erupted in surprised chatter. Sarah quickly restored order, directing teams back to their planned exercises, but her mind was reeling. She had just coordinated a real-world interdiction at a distance that seemed impossible. The professional calm she had maintained during the crisis suddenly felt fragile, and her hands began to shake slightly as the adrenaline wore off. Captain Rivera appeared at her station again, this time with a slight smile on his weathered face. He looked at her equipment setup, her organized log of communications, and the professional manner in which she had handled the unexpected crisis. Without a word, he gave her a single nod of acknowledgement before walking away to debrief his team. But Sarah had seen something in that brief moment, a flash of approval in his eyes that spoke louder than any words. She had proven herself under pressure, maintained her composure when it mattered most, and performed her duties with the precision and professionalism of a veteran operator. The rookies who crumbled under pressure were quickly reassigned. Those who thrived became permanent members of the team. As the sun began to set over the desert range and the teams prepared to return to base, Sarah carefully packed her equipment. Her body ached, her uniform was soaked with sweat, and exhaustion pulled at every muscle. But beneath the fatigue, something else stirred, confidence, hard-earned and real. She had taken her first real step from rookie to operator, from outsider to team member. The investigation into the drone incident began the following morning. Sarah sat in a small briefing room with Captain Rivera and 2 officers from base security. The unauthorized drone had been recovered from the desert floor, its camera equipment still intact. Someone had been conducting surveillance over a classified training area, and the military took such breaches seriously. Walk us through your communications log from yesterday, one of the security officers requested, sliding a notepad across the table toward Sarah. She pulled out her meticulously maintained radio log, every transmission time-stamped and documented with precise detail. This habit, drilled into her during technical school, now proved invaluable. As she described the sequence of events, the officers listened intently. They were particularly interested in the exact moment when the drone was first spotted and how quickly the response had been coordinated. Sarah explained how she had maintained communication clarity, even as radio traffic increased, how she had prioritized urgent tactical information while keeping routine communications flowing. Captain Rivera added his own observations, noting how Sarah had instinctively understood which transmissions required immediate relay and which could wait a few seconds. This situational awareness, he explained, was something that couldn't really be taught. Either a radio operator developed it through experience, or they never truly mastered the role. After the briefing concluded, Sarah returned to the communications building where Sergeant Holland was back on light duty, his ankle still wrapped but healing. He had heard about the drone incident and looked at Sarah with new respect. 3,300 meters, he said, shaking his head. That's going into the base record books. And you kept comms clean through the whole thing? Sarah nodded, feeling awkward under his praise. Just did what needed doing, she replied simply. But Holland wasn't letting her off that easily. He began asking technical questions about her equipment setup, her antenna positioning, and how she had managed signal clarity at the distances involved. As they discussed the technical details, Holland shared insights from his own years of experience, tips and tricks that weren't in any manual. Their conversation was interrupted when Captain Rivera entered the communications room with another man Sarah didn't recognize. The stranger wore civilian clothes but carried himself with obvious military bearing. His eyes were sharp and assessing as they swept across the room's equipment, and then settled on Sarah. This is Agent Morrison from the Defense Intelligence Agency, Captain Rivera introduced. He wants to ask you some questions about signal intelligence. Sarah's stomach tightened. The DIA didn't usually get involved in routine training exercises unless something bigger was at play. Agent Morrison pulled up a chair and opened a thin folder containing several photographs of electronic equipment. "Miss Chen, I need you to look at these images and tell me if you noticed anything unusual on your frequencies yesterday." The photographs showed various types of radio and electronic surveillance equipment. Sarah studied them carefully, trying to remember every detail from the previous day's operations. Then one image caught her attention. "This frequency scanner," she said, pointing to a specific device. "I did notice some brief interference on one of our secondary channels, around 1400 hours. It lasted maybe 5 seconds, then disappeared." Morrison leaned forward with sudden interest. "You're certain about the time?" When Sarah nodded and showed him her radio log confirming the exact timestamp, Morrison exchanged a meaningful glance with Captain Rivera. "That interference was likely the drone's control signal passing through your frequency range. Most operators wouldn't have even noticed it, much less logged it. The investigation," Sarah learned, "was part of a larger operation to identify who had been conducting surveillance of military facilities across the region. The drone that had been shot down was expensive commercial equipment, modified for extended range and equipped with sophisticated cameras. Whoever was behind it had technical expertise and significant resources." Over the next few days, Sarah found herself working closely with the intelligence team, helping them analyze radio frequency patterns and identify potential signal sources. Her technical knowledge and attention to detail proved valuable in ways she had never anticipated. She began to understand that her role as a radio technician extended far beyond simply relaying messages. She was part of a larger intelligence picture, where every signal and frequency anomaly could provide critical information. The breakthrough came almost by accident. Sarah was conducting routine equipment maintenance when she noticed an unusual pattern in the radio logs from several previous exercises. Small bursts of interference, always on different frequencies, always brief enough to seem like random noise. But when she plotted them on a timeline, a pattern emerged. The interference always occurred during live fire exercises or tactical operations. She brought her findings to Captain Rivera, who immediately contacted Agent Morrison. Within hours, the DIA team had expanded their investigation based on Sarah's analysis. The interference pattern suggested that someone had been monitoring military training exercises for at least 3 months, possibly longer. The surveillance was sophisticated and deliberate. Captain Rivera called Sarah into his office late one evening. The base was quiet, most personnel already off duty. He gestured for her to sit down and leaned back in his chair, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You've caused quite a stir in the intelligence community," he said finally. "Agent Morrison's team has identified a potential espionage operation based on your frequency analysis." Sarah felt a mix of pride and apprehension. She had stumbled into something far larger than routine communications work. "I just noticed the pattern, sir," she said. "Anyone else might have seen the same thing." "But they didn't," Rivera replied. "Holland has been running communications for this team for years, and he never caught it. The pattern was there in his logs too, but he didn't see it." "You did? Do you know why?" Sarah shook her head, genuinely unsure. Rivera stood and walked to his office window, looking out at the darkened base. "Because you're not just following procedures. You're thinking about what the signals mean, understanding the larger picture. That's the difference between a technician and an operator." He turned back to face her. "The team has a mission coming up next month. Real world, not training. We'll be providing communication support for a joint operation in a hostile environment. I'm recommending you as our primary radio operator." The weight of those words hit Sarah like a physical force. A real mission meant real stakes, real danger, and real consequences for any mistakes. She thought about her 3 weeks with the team, the drone incident, the investigation. Everything had been building toward this moment, testing her and preparing her without her even realizing it. "I won't let you down, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the nervous energy coursing through her. Rivera smiled slightly, the same expression he had worn after the successful drone interdiction. "I know you won't, that's why I'm recommending you." As Sarah left his office and walked across the quiet base toward her barracks, she felt the night air cool against her face. Somewhere out there, beyond the fence line and security lights, real threats existed, and soon she would be part of the team standing against them, her skills and dedication put to the ultimate test. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating, and for the first time since joining the combat controller team, Sarah felt truly ready for whatever came next. The preparation for the upcoming mission consumed the next 3 weeks. Sarah found herself in endless training sessions, equipment checks, and briefings that revealed only fragments of the larger operational picture. Security protocols meant that most team members knew only their specific roles until the final mission brief. What Sarah did know was that they would be operating in mountainous terrain, communications would be challenging, and failure was not an option. Sergeant Holland became her unlikely mentor during this period. Despite his initial skepticism about the young radio technician, he now spent hours working with her on advanced communication techniques. They practiced maintaining signal clarity in terrain that blocked or distorted transmissions, worked through contingency plans for equipment failure, and ran through emergency protocols until Sarah could execute them instinctively even under stress. Mountains eat radio signals for breakfast, Holland explained as they studied topographic maps in the communications building. You'll have dead zones, signal bounce, atmospheric interference. The equipment manual tells you what should work. Experience tells you what actually works. He traced his finger along ridgelines and valleys on the map, explaining how terrain affected different frequencies and why sometimes the old-fashioned solutions worked better than the high-tech ones. The other team members gradually warmed to Sarah's presence as well. Master Sergeant Torres, the team's senior operator, invited her to join the physical training sessions that pushed even experienced soldiers to their limits. Carrying that radio pack up a mountain isn't a job for someone who skips cardio, he said with a grin that was more challenge than humor. Sarah accepted, knowing that physical conditioning could mean the difference between success and failure in the field. During one particularly brutal training run, Torres spoke between heavy breaths about his own early days with special operations. Everyone thinks it's about being the toughest or the fastest, he said, as they climbed a steep trail loaded with full equipment. But what really matters is whether your teammates trust you when things go bad. Trust isn't given, it's earned through every small action, every training session, every time you do your job right when it would be easier to cut corners. Sarah absorbed these lessons, understanding that she was being educated in more than just radio operations. She was learning the culture and values of special operations forces, where individual excellence was expected but team cohesion was paramount. Every member depended on every other member, and any weak link could compromise the entire mission. The final mission briefing took place in a secure facility off the main base. Sarah entered the soundproofed room to find Captain Rivera and Agent Morrison already present, along with several other personnel she didn't recognize. A large screen displayed satellite imagery of a remote mountain region. The terrain was harsh and unforgiving, with steep slopes, narrow valleys, and limited access routes. "This is Operation Watchful Eagle," Captain Rivera began, using a laser pointer to highlight specific locations on the map. "Intelligence has identified a facility in this region that's been used as a coordination center for the surveillance activities we've been investigating. Our mission is to conduct reconnaissance, gather electronic intelligence, and confirm the presence of specific equipment and personnel." Sarah listened intently as the operational details unfolded. Her role would be to establish and maintain communications between the team in the field and the command center, coordinate with air support if needed, and monitor enemy communications frequencies for any sign that their presence had been detected. The mission window was tight, just 48 hours from insertion to extraction. Agent Morrison took over the briefing, providing details about the intelligence targets and the specific information they needed to gather. The facility was believed to be operated by a sophisticated criminal organization with connections to foreign intelligence services. The unauthorized surveillance of military bases was just one part of a larger operation involving industrial espionage and technology theft. "Your communication security will be critical," Morrison emphasized, looking directly at Sarah. "If they detect our radio traffic, the entire operation is compromised. We'll be using frequency hopping encrypted systems, but you'll need to maintain strict transmission discipline. No unnecessary traffic, no extended transmissions, and constant awareness of your electronic signature." After the briefing concluded, Sarah spent hours studying the communication plan, memorizing frequencies, call signs, and contingency procedures. She reviewed equipment lists and packed her radio gear with obsessive attention to detail. Every connection was checked and double-checked, every battery tested and secured. She packed backup equipment for the backup equipment, knowing that in remote mountains resupply was impossible and improvisation might be the only option. The night before departure, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk reviewing procedures in her mind, visualizing different scenarios and her responses. What if the primary radio failed? What if they encountered unexpected interference? What if she made a mistake that compromised the mission? The questions circled endlessly until she forced herself to stop. Doubt served no purpose now. She had trained, prepared, and earned her place on this team. Tomorrow would demand everything she had learned and more. The team assembled before dawn in a hangar at the far end of the base. 2 helicopters waited, their rotors beginning to turn as pilots completed pre-flight checks. Sarah stood with her team, feeling the weight of her radio pack and the collective focus of operators preparing for a dangerous mission. Captain Rivera moved among them, checking equipment and offering quiet words to each team member. When he reached Sarah, he simply nodded and said, "Remember your training. Trust your instincts. We've got your back." Then he moved on, and Sarah understood that she had received the same treatment as every other operator. She wasn't the rookie anymore. She was part of the team, expected to perform her role with the same excellence as the veterans surrounding her. The helicopter ride into the mountains took 90 minutes. Sarah sat wedged between equipment and other team members, the aircraft's vibration traveling through her body as they flew low and fast over increasingly rugged terrain. Through the open door, she watched the landscape transform from desert, flatlands to foothills, and finally, to the steep mountains that would be their area of operations. They landed in a narrow valley, just as the sun touched the eastern peaks. The team moved quickly, unloading equipment and establishing a temporary position while the helicopters departed. Then silence descended, broken only by wind and the distant call of a bird. They were alone in hostile territory, dependent on their skills, their equipment, and each other. Sarah immediately began setting up the communication station, working efficiently despite the altitude and cold mountain air. Her hands moved through familiar motions, extending the antenna, connecting cables, powering up the radio systems. Within minutes, she had established contact with the command center, her voice calm and professional as she confirmed their position and operational status. Captain Rivera gathered the team for a final equipment check and brief review of the plan. Then they moved out, beginning the climb toward their objective. Sarah adjusted her radio pack and fell into line, her breathing controlled despite the thin air and steep terrain. This was it, the real mission. Everything she had trained for came down to the next 48 hours in these unforgiving mountains. The climb took most of the morning. The team moved in tactical formation, constantly alert for any sign of enemy presence or surveillance. Sarah struggled with the altitude at first, her lungs burning as they ascended steep slopes while carrying heavy equipment. But she refused to ask for rest breaks or show weakness. Around her, the experienced operators maintained a steady pace, their breathing controlled, their movements efficient despite the challenging terrain. By early afternoon, they reached their primary observation position on a ridge overlooking a valley. Below them, partially hidden by trees and natural terrain features, sat the target facility. It appeared to be a small compound with several buildings, communications antennas, and what looked like solar panels for power generation. Sarah immediately noted the sophisticated antenna array, far more advanced than what would be expected for a simple remote facility. Captain Rivera established their position while Sarah set up the communications equipment in a sheltered area behind the ridgeline. The location provided good line of sight for radio transmission, but concealed them from visual observation. As she worked, she monitored multiple frequencies, listening for any enemy communications or signs that their presence had been detected. The team settled into observation mode. Using long-range optics and surveillance equipment, they began documenting the facility's activities, photographing structures, and identifying personnel. Sarah maintained communications watch, sending periodic reports to command and monitoring for any changes in the electromagnetic environment that might indicate a security alert. Hours passed with methodical precision. The team rotated between observation positions, rest periods, and security watch. Sarah found the waiting more stressful than the initial insertion. Every moment sitting exposed on the ridge meant another opportunity for detection, another chance for something to go wrong. She focused on her equipment, constantly monitoring frequencies and ensuring their communications remained secure. As darkness fell, the facility below came to life with activity. Lights illuminated the compound, and Sarah detected increased radio traffic on several frequencies. She recorded everything, noting timestamps, frequencies, and signal characteristics. Some of the transmissions were encrypted, but the patterns themselves provided valuable intelligence about the facility's communication security and operational procedures. Command, this is Eagle 1. Captain Rivera spoke quietly into his radio, using the mission call sign. We have positive identification of surveillance equipment, matching the gear used in the base operations. Requesting permission to move closer for detailed documentation. Sarah relayed the transmission and waited for the response. In the command center far away, analysts and commanders were evaluating the intelligence, assessing risks, and making decisions that would affect everyone on the team. Finally, the response came through Sarah's headset. Eagle 1, permission granted. Maintain communication protocols and execute extreme caution. The team prepared to move. They would wait until the early morning hours when human alertness was at its lowest, then approach the facility for closer reconnaissance. Sarah reconfigured her radio equipment for mobile operation, ensuring she could maintain communications while moving. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever as she checked and rechecked every connection. At 0200 hours, the team began their approach. They moved down the ridge in complete darkness, using night vision equipment to navigate the treacherous terrain. Sarah followed Master Sergeant Torres, trusting his experience to guide her through the darkness, while she focused on maintaining communication, readiness, and avoiding any sounds that might alert enemy security. The descent took over an hour, each step carefully placed, each movement deliberate and controlled. Sarah's world narrowed to the glowing green image in her night vision goggles and the weight of her equipment. Sweat soaked her uniform despite the cold mountain air, and her legs trembled with fatigue. But she kept moving, matching the pace of the operators around her. They established a new position just 200 meters from the facility's perimeter. From this vantage point, they could clearly observe the compound and document its security measures, personnel, and equipment. Sarah remained motionless, her radio equipment powered down to minimize electronic signatures. They would observe in silence for 1 hour, then retreat before dawn increased the risk of visual detection. Through his observation equipment, Captain Rivera identified several key targets: sophisticated signal intelligence gear, encrypted communication systems, and what appeared to be data storage servers. He whispered descriptions to Sarah, who memorized every detail to include in her report. The facility was clearly much more than a simple remote station. It was a professional intelligence operation with significant resources and technical capability. Then everything changed. A vehicle approached the compound on the access road, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The team froze, watching as the vehicle stopped at the facility's gate. 2 men emerged, and Sarah noticed they were carrying what looked like radio detection equipment. Her stomach clenched with sudden fear. Were they conducting routine security checks, or had something triggered their suspicion? Captain Rivera made a quick hand signal. Prepare to withdraw. The team began slowly backing away from their observation position, moving with agonizing slowness to avoid making any sound or movement that might attract attention. Sarah clutched her radio equipment, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give away their position. The men with the detection equipment began walking the facility's perimeter, sweeping their gear in systematic patterns. Sarah watched through her night vision as the equipment's antenna swept across the landscape, coming closer to their position with each pass. If the enemy detected any of their equipment's residual electronic signature, the entire mission would be compromised, and they would be trapped between the facility and the mountainside. Move. Now. Quietly, Torres whispered, and the team increased their pace slightly, still moving with tactical discipline but covering distance more quickly. Sarah's muscles screamed in protest as she climbed back up the slope they had descended hours earlier, the radio pack seeming to grow heavier with each step. Behind them, the security sweep continued, the men moving methodically along the perimeter. They had climbed about 50 meters when Sarah's foot slipped on loose rock. She caught herself immediately, but several small stones tumbled down the slope, clicking against other rocks as they fell. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the mountain silence. Everyone froze. Below them, one of the security guards stopped and turned, looking toward the darkness where the sound had originated. Sarah held her breath, not daring to move a muscle. Her leg cramped from the awkward position, but she ignored the pain, focusing entirely on remaining absolutely still. The guard stared into the darkness for what felt like an eternity, then said something to his companion and continued his patrol. They had dismissed the sound as natural rockfall, a common occurrence in the mountains. The team remained frozen for several more minutes, then continued their withdrawal. By the time they reached their original observation position on the ridge, the sky was beginning to lighten in the east. They had successfully gathered critical intelligence, but the near detection had reminded everyone how precarious their situation truly was. Captain Rivera allowed a brief rest while they remained in position through the daylight hours. Sarah reported their findings to command, transmitting in brief, encrypted bursts that minimized their electronic signature. The intelligence analysts confirmed that the information was valuable and matched their suspicions about the facility's purpose. As the team rested, Sarah reflected on the night's events. Her mistake with the loose rock could have compromised everything, yet the team had adapted and continued the mission. Torres caught her eye and gave her a slight nod of acknowledgement. The message was clear. Mistakes happen. What matters is how you respond and what you learn. The second day on the mountain brought unexpected complications. Sarah was monitoring routine communications when she detected unusual radio traffic on a frequency she hadn't heard before. The transmissions were brief and encrypted, but their timing and pattern suggested coordination between the facility below and another location. She immediately documented the frequency and characteristics, then quietly alerted Captain Rivera. Rivera listened to her assessment, his expression growing serious as he understood the implications. If the facility was coordinating with other sites, their intelligence picture was incomplete. The surveillance operation they were investigating might be larger and more distributed than anyone had realized. He made the decision to extend their observation period and gather more information about these new communications. The extension meant they would be on the mountain for at least another day. Pushing their supplies and endurance, Sarah recalculated her battery power and equipment capability, determining they could maintain communications for approximately 36 more hours if they were careful. She reported this to Rivera, who nodded and adjusted his plans accordingly. The mission had just become more complex, but the intelligence value justified the additional risk. Throughout the day, Sarah continued monitoring the mysterious frequency, while maintaining their regular communication schedule with command. She began to notice patterns in the transmissions, certain repeated elements that suggested they might be using a standardized communication protocol. Though she couldn't decrypt the content, the patterns themselves provided valuable intelligence about the organization's communication security and procedures. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the mountain, Sarah detected something that made her blood run cold. A new radio signature appeared, different from anything she had heard before. It was a burst transmission, very brief but powerful, and it was coming from somewhere behind their position, higher up the mountain. She immediately alerted Rivera and provided him with a directional bearing based on her equipment's readings. Rivera called the team together for a quick tactical meeting. If there was another facility or observation post above them, they were potentially caught between two enemy positions. The team's security was now seriously compromised, and they needed to either identify the threat or withdraw immediately. Rivera made the difficult decision to send a two-person reconnaissance team to investigate while the rest maintained their observation. Position Torres and another operator named Ramirez volunteered for the reconnaissance. They would climb higher on the mountain, locate the source of the transmission, and determine if it posed a threat to the team. Sarah provided them with the exact frequency and transmission characteristics, and they departed just before dusk, moving silently into the gathering darkness. The wait was agonizing. Sarah maintained communications watch while simultaneously tracking Torres and Ramirez through periodic radio check-ins. They climbed for nearly 2 hours, working their way up steep terrain in complete darkness. Finally, Torres's voice came through Sarah's headset, barely above a whisper. "We have visual on the transmission source. It's another surveillance post, appears to be monitoring the valley and surrounding approaches. 2 personnel visible, armed with sophisticated communications gear." Sarah relayed the information to Captain Rivera and command, her mind racing through the tactical implications. The enemy had established a layered security system, with the main facility in the valley and observation posts on the surrounding high ground. It was a professional setup that demonstrated significant resources and planning. Their own position, while well chosen, was now potentially observable from above. "Command wants us to maintain position and continue gathering intelligence," Rivera told the team after receiving orders. "But we're switching to full tactical alert. Assume we may be under observation and prepare for possible compromise." The team immediately adjusted their security posture, establishing additional watch positions and preparing contingency plans for emergency withdrawal. Torres and Ramirez remained in position above, observing the enemy surveillance post throughout the night. Sarah coordinated communications between three positions now: the main team, the reconnaissance element, and command. The workload was intense, requiring her to constantly switch between frequencies and maintain awareness of multiple situations simultaneously. This was exactly the kind of complex communication management that training could never fully replicate. As dawn approached on their third day in the mountains, the situation escalated further. The enemy surveillance post detected something, their radio traffic suddenly increasing in volume and urgency. Sarah couldn't decrypt their transmissions, but the change in pattern was unmistakable. They had spotted something, possibly the team's position or perhaps Torres and Ramirez above them. "Eagle 1, this is command." The radio suddenly crackled in Sarah's ear. "Be advised, we're receiving signals intelligence indicating possible enemy alert status. Prepare for potential compromise and be ready to execute emergency extraction." Protocol. Sarah's hands moved automatically through the emergency communication procedures, even as her mind processed the implications. If they were detected, extraction would be difficult and dangerous. The narrow valley that had provided concealment also limited their escape routes. Rivera was already organizing the team, preparing defensive positions while maintaining their observation mission. Then Torres reported in, "Enemy post is packing up. Looks like they're preparing to relocate or investigate something. They're definitely on alert." Sarah relayed the information and waited for orders, her radio equipment already configured for rapid shutdown and mobile operation if needed. The next hour unfolded in tense silence. The team watched as activity increased at both the facility below and the surveillance post above. Personnel moved with purpose, vehicles started, and radio traffic spiked across multiple frequencies. Something had triggered their security protocols, though Sarah couldn't determine if it was their presence or some other factor. "All stations, this is command," came the voice through Sarah's headset. "We've confirmed through separate intelligence sources that the facility is preparing for a planned equipment transfer. The alert status is not related to your presence. Continue observation and document all activity." Relief washed through Sarah, though she maintained her professional focus. The team had not been compromised, and they were now positioned to observe what might be a significant intelligence opportunity. She adjusted her monitoring to capture all frequencies as the facility prepared for the transfer operation. Over the next several hours, Sarah documented a complex operation involving multiple vehicles, personnel, and sophisticated equipment. The level of organization and resources demonstrated that they were dealing with a major intelligence operation, not a small criminal enterprise. Captain Rivera photographed everything while Sarah recorded all radio communications, building a comprehensive intelligence picture. The equipment transfer revealed connections to at least 3 other locations. Based on the radio traffic Sarah intercepted, she plotted the communication bearings and estimated distances, providing command with potential locations for additional surveillance targets. What had started as investigation of unauthorized drone flights over military bases had evolved into exposure of a significant espionage network. As the transfer operation concluded and the facility returned to normal activity, Rivera made the decision to begin their withdrawal. They had gathered extensive intelligence over 3 days, pushed their supplies to the limit, and remained undetected despite operating in close proximity to a professional enemy. It was time to extract and let analysts process everything they had collected. Sarah began the process of securing her equipment and preparing for movement. She transmitted a final comprehensive report to command, including all frequency data, transmission patterns, and bearing information for the additional sites they had identified. The data package was extensive, requiring several encrypted transmissions to complete, but she managed it without compromising their communication security. Torres and Ramirez rejoined the main team after carefully withdrawing from their elevated position. They reported that the enemy surveillance post had indeed relocated, moving to a different position on the mountain, which would actually work in the team's favor during their extraction. The route they planned to use would no longer be under direct observation. The withdrawal began in late afternoon, with the team moving in tactical formation back toward the valley where extraction helicopters would meet them. Sarah found the descent even more challenging than the climb had been. Her body was exhausted from 3 days of constant alertness, limited sleep, and the physical demands of mountain operations. Her radio pack felt like it had doubled in weight, and every muscle protested with each step. But she kept pace with the team, drawing on reserves of determination she hadn't known she possessed. Around her, the experienced operators moved with the same professional efficiency they had maintained throughout the mission, their fatigue hidden beneath layers of discipline and training. Sarah understood now what Torres had meant about trust. Every member of this team was pushing through exhaustion and discomfort, relying on each other to maintain focus and capability until the mission was complete. They reached the extraction point just as darkness fell. Sarah immediately established communications with the incoming helicopters, guiding them to the landing zone while coordinating with command about the extraction sequence. The familiar sound of rotor blades grew louder, and soon the helicopters appeared, landing in the narrow valley with practiced precision. The team loaded quickly, and within minutes they were airborne, leaving the hostile mountains behind. Sarah slumped in her seat, still clutching her radio equipment as the adrenaline that had sustained her for 3 days finally began to drain away. Through the helicopter's open door, she watched the mountains recede into darkness, knowing that somewhere in those peaks an enemy facility continued operating, unaware that their secrets had been thoroughly documented. Captain Rivera caught her eye across the helicopter's interior and gave her a thumbs up. Around him, the other team members showed similar signs of approval. Sarah had completed her first real mission, maintained flawless communications under difficult conditions, made critical intelligence discoveries, and proven herself as a capable operator. The rookie radio technician had earned her place on the team through performance when it mattered most. As the helicopters carried them back toward base, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. But she also understood that this mission was just one step in a much longer journey. The intelligence they had gathered would lead to more operations, more challenges, and more opportunities to prove herself. The espionage network they had uncovered was still active, and the work of stopping it had only just begun. The debriefing lasted for 2 full days. Sarah sat in secure conference rooms with Captain Rivera, Agent Morrison, and various intelligence analysts, walking through every detail of the mission. Her meticulous radio logs became the foundation for understanding the communication network they had discovered. Analysts pored over the frequency data, transmission patterns, and bearing information she had collected, using it to build a comprehensive map of the espionage operation. On the 3rd day after their return, Sarah was summoned to a meeting in a part of the base she had never visited before. The building required special security clearance, and armed guards checked her identification 3 times before allowing her to enter. Inside, she found herself in a conference room with senior military officers and civilian officials she didn't recognize. Captain Rivera was there too, along with Agent Morrison and several other people who appeared to be high-ranking intelligence personnel. A colonel she had never met before stood at the head of the table. "Miss Chen, your frequency analysis and communication intelligence during Operation Watchful Eagle has provided breakthrough information in a case we've been investigating for over a year. The bearing data you collected has allowed us to identify 4 additional facilities involved in the espionage network. We're coordinating with federal law, enforcement, and international partners to conduct simultaneous raids within the next 72 hours. Sarah listened in stunned silence as the colonel explained how her work had contributed to unraveling an operation that had been stealing military and industrial secrets for years. The unauthorized drone surveillance that had started everything was just the visible tip of a much larger intelligence operation with connections spanning multiple countries. Her attention to detail in logging that brief 5-second interference pattern had been the thread that, when pulled, unraveled the entire network. "There's something else," Agent Morrison added, sliding a folder across the table toward her. "The Defense Intelligence Agency would like to offer you a position as a signals intelligence specialist. Your technical skills, attention to detail, and field performance have been exceptional. We believe you have significant potential in intelligence work." The offer was both flattering and overwhelming. Sarah had joined the military as a radio technician, never imagining she would be recruited into the intelligence community. She looked at Captain Rivera, uncertain how to respond. He smiled slightly and said, "It's your decision, Chen. You've proven yourself with my team and you always have a place here. But this is a significant opportunity. Whatever you choose, you've earned it." Sarah asked for time to consider the offer, and the colonel granted her 48 hours to make her decision. As she left the secure building, her mind spun with possibilities. Intelligence work would mean different challenges, perhaps less field time but more impact on strategic operations. It would mean continued education, specialized training, and a career path she had never considered. That evening, Sarah found Sergeant Holland in the communications building, running equipment maintenance. He listened as she described the offer, then leaned back in his chair with a knowing expression. "Remember when you first showed up here scared and trying so hard to prove yourself?" he asked. "I didn't think you'd last a month, but you kept showing up, kept working, kept paying attention when others would have just followed the checklist." He stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a worn manual that Sarah recognized as his personal reference guide, filled with years of handwritten notes and observations. "This is what experience looks like," he said, tapping the manual. "Every operator who's worth anything builds their own understanding, goes beyond the official procedures. You've been doing that from day one, even when you didn't realize it. Whether you stay here or go to DIA, you'll succeed because you understand that the real work isn't just following instructions. It's thinking, analyzing, understanding what the information means." Over the next 2 days, Sarah talked with Torres, Rivera, and several other team members. Each offered perspective based on their own experiences and careers. Torres told her that the best operators were the ones who found where they could make the biggest difference, regardless of where that was. Rivera reminded her that intelligence work and field operations weren't separate worlds but interconnected parts of a larger mission. On the morning her decision was due, Sarah reported to the secure building with her answer. She had chosen to accept the DIA position, but with one condition. She wanted to remain available for field operations with Captain Rivera's team when her intelligence work allowed. The colonel considered this and agreed, recognizing that her field experience would actually enhance her intelligence analysis. Agent Morrison explained that Sarah would undergo 6 months of specialized training at the Defense Intelligence Analysis Center, learning advanced signals intelligence techniques, intelligence analysis methods, and strategic assessment. After that, she would be assigned to a joint task force investigating transnational espionage operations, with the possibility of field deployment for specific operations. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the communications building one last time before departing for training. The team had gathered for an informal farewell, and to her surprise, Captain Rivera presented her with a unit coin, a tradition recognizing significant contributions to the team. "You came here as a rookie technician," he said, addressing not just Sarah but the entire assembled team. "You leave as an operator who changed the course of an important investigation. That 3,300-meter shot wasn't just about the drone. It was about precision, focus, and doing your job perfectly when it mattered. You've shown those same qualities every day since." Master Sergeant Torres stepped forward next, handing Sarah a small package. Inside was a patch, custom-made, showing radio waves and the mountain profile from Operation Watchful Eagle. "For your collection," he said with a grin. "To remember where you started and what you're capable of." Sergeant Holland was last, and he simply shook her hand. "You'll do fine, Chen. Just remember that all the technology in the world doesn't replace thinking. Keep using that brain of yours and you'll make a difference wherever you go." As Sarah drove away from the base that had been her home for the past months, she reflected on the incredible journey from nervous rookie to intelligence specialist. The path hadn't been what she expected when she first enlisted, but she had learned that the best opportunities often came from doing excellent work at whatever task was in front of her, even when that task seemed small or routine. The unauthorized drone that had prompted that long-range shot seemed like ancient history now, but it had set everything in motion. One precise action, one documented interference pattern, one moment of noticing what others had missed. Those small things had cascaded into a mission that uncovered an international espionage network and changed the trajectory of her career. 6 months later, Sarah completed her intelligence training at the top of her class. She was assigned to the Joint Task Force investigating transnational espionage, working with analysts and operators from multiple agencies. The raids coordinated based on her frequency analysis from Operation Watchful Eagle had been successful, resulting in arrests, seizure of equipment, and disruption of a network that had been operating for years. Her first major assignment with the task force was analyzing communication patterns from a new suspected espionage operation, this time involving satellite communication theft. As she studied the frequency data and transmission characteristics, she felt the same excitement she had experienced on that first day when she noticed the interference pattern. This was her calling, finding the hidden patterns, understanding what the signals meant, and turning technical observations into actionable intelligence. Captain Rivera's team requested her participation in another field operation 9 months after she left. She flew back to join them for a week-long mission in a different region, this time serving dual roles as communication specialist and intelligence analyst. The team welcomed her back like she had never left, and she found that her intelligence training had made her even more valuable in the field, able to immediately analyze and contextualize what she observed. On the final day of that mission, as the team prepared for extraction, Sarah stood for a moment looking across the landscape they had been surveying. She thought about that young radio technician who had arrived at the team compound just over a year ago, uncertain and trying so hard to prove herself. That person seemed impossibly distant now, separated not by time but by experience, challenges overcome, and capabilities discovered. Captain Rivera approached and stood beside her, following her gaze across the terrain. "You know what made the difference with you?" he asked, not waiting for an answer. "It wasn't the technical skills or the training, though. Those matter. It was that you understood that every detail matters, every signal has meaning, every observation could be important. You treated a 5-second interference pattern with the same seriousness as a critical battlefield communication. That's what makes an exceptional operator." Sarah smiled, remembering that morning when she had logged that brief interference, not knowing it would lead to anything significant, but documenting it anyway because proper procedure demanded attention to every anomaly. "I just did what made sense," she replied. "Exactly," Rivera said. "The best operators always do. Welcome back, Chen, even if it's just for a week." As they boarded the extraction helicopter, Sarah secured her radio equipment one more time, feeling the familiar weight and the satisfaction of another successful mission. Her journey was far from over. The intelligence world was vast, filled with challenges and threats that demanded the skills she was still developing. But she had proven to herself and others that she belonged in this world, that a rookie radio technician could become something more through dedication, intelligence, and the willingness to see beyond the obvious. The helicopter lifted off, carrying them away from another mountain, another mission, another chapter in the ongoing story of protecting secrets and uncovering threats. And somewhere in a secure facility, analysts were already working on the intelligence she had helped gather, turning observations into operations, patterns into understanding, signals into security. The work continued, and Sarah Chen was exactly where she belonged, making a difference one frequency at a time.